Hello.
What's happening. So yeah, when we get stuck in, we've got 40 minutes here because I'm a cheap ass and won't pay
Jake here.
for the Pro Zoom. I was paying for
Alright.
it, and then um I wasn't using it, and I was getting like charged 30 quid a month. I was like, I'm not fuck paying 30 quid a month not to be using it.
Why would you want to pro Zoom?
Just
Or like the podcast and stuff like
it
that, is it?
goes over the 40 minutes. You see, you
Right.
only have 40 minutes if you don't pay for it.
I was hoping to be coming on the podcast this week with like black eye, a wee scar or something, some war wounds.
Shay crack. Look, fucking, it is what it is. You'll be hopefully you get all sorted and then back on back.
Next week, yeah.
What is the crack anyway? What have they said? What's the next step?
Uh I'm seeing a specialist next week, but I was all positive. I didn't really care too much. I was glad to be able to eat and drink again. But see when I rang a doctor yesterday, he didn't give me a whole lot of faith, to be honest. He was kinda like, I don't know if you'll fight again all this year, and I was like, what the fuck you mean? I was like, I'm looking to fight ASAP, like, but
Yeah, look, I wouldn't go off one fucking
that
doc.
that never crossed my mind. But a doctor too is like a normal person that doesn't fight. They also think like when something happens, probably like, oh, you should
Knock that in the
maybe look
head.
at stuff.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't listen. Sure, look at fucking Ryan Curtis. They told him he wouldn't even walk. You know what I mean?
Uh,
No, I wouldn't go off that. Obviously, go see a specialist um, and see what the crack is. Like, and see what
I
this.
actually went up to 81 kg after my fight. I felt a bit pudgy, so I stood in the scales and I was up to 81. I was like, fuck.
So, that's some jump, isn't it? Like, it's
Uh,
mad how quickly you can go up.
I went in the fight week, what, about 76, some 5 kilo over my weight.
I mean, food and water. It'll come off you.
Definitely, like I feel bloated as fuck. Like
Yeah,
I feel
no,
like I could lose 3 kilo in a day. Like,
it'll fly out of you. So it will.
uh,
I love when you get stuck in, maybe because we have only that 40 minutes and kind it'll come up, it'll give us like a warning anyway.
uh,
So topic of discussion, water loading.
yeah,
Um yeah, so the reason being I wanted to discuss this was a few people and if you're listening, you know who you are. But a few people like had said to me either number one, why are we not water loading when they only had like a couple of percent to cut? Um, or another person that I told them not to water load didn't put water loading in their strategy for the week because they only had around 6% to cut. They hadn't really done it before either, which is another reason why you didn't want to put it in. And then their coach like not overruled me, but didn't realize they were working with me or working with anybody, and then told them, no, you need to water load, because it tricks your body, and your body's an idiot, and your body will then lose the weight. So, yeah, those couple of things, and just even a lot in general, a lot of people are like quick to just go, right, when am I water loading? When am I starting the water load? It's almost as if the water load has become the go-to strategy for making weight when it's just another strategy that you can use. It's not like I have to water load. And it's very nuanced in terms of like whether or not you should water load. Um, in my
think
opinion.
it's like another safety blanket for people. They think, right, I'm going to cut my carbs, like so them stuff like that there, but they think, right, I'm going to water load as well. That'll get a bit of weight off. You know what I mean? They're trying to calculate in their head,
Look,
right, if I do these.
it does work. Like, it is an effective strategy. I suppose. Um, like I think I'm trying to look at the numbers again. I think it's like, anywhere up mostly um 2-3% of your body weight potentially, if you're a responder. Um like you could lose up the I think the highest I think the seen was in around 3% maybe.
Have you ever seen percentages of people that respond and don't respond? Was there any like
No, I don't know if there's
any?
I don't know if there's any really sort of data on that. Well, maybe if you look
No,
at you can look into if you look at the actual details in the studies and the separate studies on water loading, because there's a few that's just in general. I think there's one in swimmers and there's one in a couple obviously in fighters and stuff, and more so
it might
grappling.
be too individual based as well, like because there's obviously so much things that can
If you
affect the
can get,
water load.
if you can get a look at the actual the actual tables and see what the individual responses were, I think they are quite varied. You know what I mean? Like there's some
Aye.
going from fucking that's an average response is like 2%, but then there's other people that have a lot lower
Hmm.
weight loss. But I need to look at the actual studies and see like what the actual individual responses are. Um, I think you can get on the read reels thing, but I think he has his papers locked. And I need to see if I can get access to it. I'm starting that thing with him next week anyway, so I'll just ask him himself and the guy that done the research on it all.
So
So
let's chat about so I'll say we were speaking about it off camera there, like the scientific like formula calculation, whatever you want to call it, is obviously loads of people have went 100 mil per kg for 3 days, and then they've cut that down to 15 mil. But we've obviously spoke as well off camera about that you're saying that people, as long as if they up their actual fluid intake from what it normally is, that you can still gain the benefits of a water load.
yeah, so look, I suppose we'll pull it back a wee bit and discuss like what is an actual water load and how does it work. People think, oh, it tricks your body. Um, Essentially, the way it works is, well, the way they say it works is there's aquaporin channels, which is essentially just basically like just normal channels. You think about like I suppose like a dam almost to an extent, right? So then your kidneys obviously are gonna your body responds to the water load by detecting that there's too much water coming in, and basically what it'll do is allow that excess water to be excreted, and then
Yeah,
when you decrease that, there's all sorts of impacts with aldosterone, like anti-diuretic hormone and stuff like this, and it drops way down and jumps way back up again. There's a lot of hormonal changes, but essentially in like a physical change is like the channels are basically down regulated. So what can happen is that fluid can be reabsorbed essentially. So it'll filter a certain amount and then a certain amount can be reabsorbed. So what happens is it basically down regulates those channels. So then the fluid isn't being reabsorbed and then you end up just excreting
yeah.
excess fluid. So it kind of hormonally has an impact then on your aquaporin channels, and then it just down regulates them, and basically you piss out more than what you've taken in essentially, right? So it is like it's not like, oh, it tricked my body here or whatever. It's just it actually switches off a process of reabsorption because it doesn't need to reabsorb it because there's too much, and it's just like I don't need to take any more back in, just let it all go out. So it just basically shuts the entrance and opens the exit essentially. So that's what happens. So then people think that they need to massively overdo it. And that's where the 100 mil per kilogram, that comes from Reed Reels studies on combat sports. It's what, they're seeing the likes of the fight dietitian and other people, if they're going bang off the research. But if you go beyond that Instagram post or beyond that, like, one person saying one thing and actually look into the nuances of it, like, you don't necessarily have to go 100 mil per kilogram. Like, if for talk's sake, I drink 2 liters a day and I'm like what fucking 100 kilos, and then I go up to that's 10 liters. Do you know what I mean? I'm going from I'm in excess of 8 liters now. Like
Aye.
that's near too much. Like in my opinion, even above 10 liters, it starts to get dangerous. 10 and above starts to get really dangerous. So there's no need to go to that extreme. Now, if you're drinking maybe 3 liters and you're 70 kilos and you go to 100 mil and you go to 7 liters, that's obviously near just double over double, which is sensible enough. So it kind of boils down to what's your habitual, in my opinion anyway, what I've seen, what your habitual fluid intake looks like, total fluid intake, not just water and like everything, your drinks, your whole lot, and then going above that, whether it's 1.5 times, 2 times, whatever, just going excess above what you normally drink should have the same impact. And whether or not going more equals a better response, it's not overly known. Do you know what I mean? Like it hasn't really been all the different kind of ways of doing it hasn't really been shown or hasn't been studied either. So it's not a case that this will work for you for a start, might not work. It's not a case of yes, you have to do bang on 100 mil for 3 days or 4 days and then do a drop. it's not a case of, you need to do double your fluid intake and then drop. It's a case of like, what will work for you, what's individual to you. Some people telling, like that guy the other day, his coach telling him to do 10 liters just randomly out of the blue, and he's 80 kilos, and his normal fluid intake is 2.5 to 3 liters. So he's going 7 to 7.5 liters excess fluid intake. Like that's uncomfortable. And it's
That's what I was going to say. Like when you're chatting about, say, the bigger person, or like you did 100 ml per kg.
yeah.
Like say a man's 100 kg, like he's drinking stacks of fluid. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah,
But then you look at the other end of the scale too. For example, like we had Ben Mahan fight a couple of weeks ago, and his fluid intake was already like seriously high.
yeah.
So again, would a
You,
water load even work for him? Because what's the point? You can't be firing 10 liters into him if he's already drinking six. You know what I mean? Like
that's it there. If you go somebody, maybe, right, say somebody's like somebody's fucking 60 kilos, right, say for toxic, and going by the research, it's 100 mil per kilogram. That's 6 liters. What if he drinks 5 liters a day? Is an extra liter going to be enough? Who knows?
no, it's probably not going to be enough
Maybe,
change.
maybe not. Maybe you need an extra 2 liters. Maybe you need an extra three. So, in my opinion, like water loading is so like nuanced that it's not one of those things that you should be like people ask me about when am I water loading, how much am I water loading, and it's almost like that's the first thing that they want to go to, because people have now went water loading's the only thing that you do. They forget about fucking everything else that you can do: fiber, sodium, carbs, fluid volume, food volume, sweating. All the other strategies that you can use, and it's almost like water loading's the goat at the top. It's our goat.
Right.
It shouldn't really be. It's like, is it applicable? Right? What's your normal fluid intake? Like, how can we increase that, but not uncomfortably increase it? And then,
Again, like we said too, there's people there that obviously when they do the water load, they're obviously maybe switched on to other acute strategies, but then do them for too long then.
yeah, well, there you go.
Because
Like,
they do them with a water load and be like, oh, I don't want to retain the water, so I'm going to cut fiber, sodium, carbs,
when you
and they do
said
it for too long then.
about somebody putting up a poster saying you can do like 3 to 7 days, and the two studies, they put two studies and they joined the three and say 3 to 7 days, because this study says three, this study says seven, so we can do both. But if you look at the two studies, like the one is Reed Reel and the other one is like that Cho et al. And that one is the 7 day. They do a 7 day load, 6 to 7 liters, but it doesn't discuss what the people's habitual intake was, what their habitual fluid intake was. It doesn't discuss then when they do the 7 days of high and then go
What
into
strategy is the reason?
a drop. They do like a weight taper, basically, they done. But it doesn't tell you how much they drink a day. It doesn't tell you what strategies they're using in terms of acute weight loss strategies. Even Reed Reels one, as far as I can see, didn't really do, they didn't do salt restriction, fluid restriction, fiber restriction. They didn't go into a fucking sauna and start cutting and all there as well. So, a lot of these are taken like almost separate to the context that they're going to be used in, if that makes sense. It's like water loading works. Yes, it does work. But what happens then when we apply it with everything else and do the whole lot together? Does it work as well? Is it now dangerous? Is there going to be potential issues? Do you know what I mean? So that's what you have to look at.
Say for example, you water loaded by itself, your diet hasn't changed. Like obviously, like you'd still lose weight for you, say, as the exit door opens for you flushing the water out. Like obviously, you might lose like a certain amount of weight on the scales, but obviously that increases when you combine it with other good strategies. Like you would lose more because you don't have the salt and the carbs, etc., retaining the water then as well.
You'll also, yeah, you'll lose from those strategies as well. But does it then now start to become dangerous because you're doing those as well? Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? If you said there a minute ago, like somebody like maybe does low sodium for too long for talk's sake, right? Again, using an example, somebody there recently didn't follow what they're 100% told to do, cut their salt too long, water loaded against my advice, done what their coach told them to do, 10 liters plus, and tapering down off that. You know, when you then start to cut sodium for too long, maybe you cut carbs you're maybe losing a bit, carby foods, you're losing a bit of sodium there from that as well. You're losing fluid, you're starting to become dehydrated. Um, and then your water, not really so much the dehydration, but more the drop in sodium is going to be the issue, especially when you're water loading, because like if you think about it, when you water load, right, you have this should be full. It's not really maybe a good example, but you imagine this is like salt down here, and we're up to about here with fluid, right? And we have normal balance in the blood. So we have the right ratio of water to salt. Then I come along and start fucking filling it up with more fluid. So now the amount of salt that's in there has probably stayed the same, but the amount of fluid ratio to that salt has now massively increased. And so basically the ratio of sodium now in the blood is low, and you've changed the osmolarity of the blood, and the fluid is high. So that's where you can end up with a thing called hyponatremia. This is where you can get very sick, you can die, you can have serious issues. A couple of that, then maybe that's a situation of water loading, especially if you're not excreting it and you're not pissing it out. That's another thing. If people drink too fast, the cells can fill up and you don't excrete it as quickly because your excretion doesn't keep up with the intake as well. Or if you drink too much, you can't piss it out at the rate that you need to, because if too much coming in, not enough going out, and now it just starts to swell up. So that's
you see how many people do. They wake up first thing, they're like, right, I need to pin a liter of water here to get my intake up, and they just
fired into them. Like I
do it too fast.
I stopped by earlier on, and it was like about maybe 12 o'clock, and he's like, I have 3 liters in me already. And he's like, why are you drinking? Like, he's on the 6 liters now because his coach told him. And like, why are you flooring the liters, like gradually spreading right through the day? Because then your body can keep up and it can excrete at the rate. But right, go back to the example. If you have your normal ratio of fluid to electrolytes, fluid to sodium, say for talk's sake, but now you've done 5, 6, 7 days, or maybe even 3 days of low salt, and that's sodium concentration in your blood is already decreased. So maybe your fucking, if I have a marker, I don't even have a marker. I had markers. I don't know. I had markers. So you had, so say your salt was originally, I don't know if you can see that up there, maybe you can't, right? Maybe blue would be better, you can see it. So say this is your original concentration, but now you start to decrease your salt intake, and now your sodium concentration is down here, and then you pile the fluid on top of a water load. Now you've went from, normal water loading can have an impact on your osmolarity of your blood, but now you've already decreased the sodium, and you've maybe done it for too long, so your sodium's already decreased, and then you're firing the fucking water in on top of that. So now the ratio is massively different again, even greater. Right. You know what I mean? So then that's where it gets really, really dangerous. Like, so that's why people shouldn't be playing around with the water load unless they need to do it, unless they know what they're doing, and they're doing the strategies at the right time as well. Because the studies, if you look at the studies, conclusions are, yes, water loading is safe, no risk of hyponatremia, blah, blah, blah. But they're not doing it in the context of actual full-on acute weight cutting.
Strategies as well of it.
Yeah, they're not throwing the low salt, they're not doing the low fiber, they're not going in and sweating then in the sauna. You imagine then again, right? So the 3 things for me would be the water load, the fluid intake with the water load, the restriction, not so much the restriction, but the fluid intake, the low salt, and then the sweat, because those 3 things are going to impact the concentration of sodium in your blood. So too much water impacts the ratio, too little salt impacts the ratio. You start to do sweating, then you're sweating, and if you're a heavy sweater especially, you're starting to lose the salt as well out of your blood too. So those 3 things can potentially might not, your body might like respond and fucking like hold on to the salt as well. But those 3 things, in my opinion, would impact your sodium levels in your blood and can be potentially dangerous. And this is where just water loading for the sake of it, or cutting salt too long or whatever, is the wrong thing to do.
let's talk about non-responders then. Like, is there any like science or anything that you've read up that you think would be a reason why a person will become a non-responder, or do you think it's just genetic, or do you think it's to do with like their diet, or what do you think it is? Like, obviously for myself, I was a non-responder anyway, and like the
Maybe,
stuff that the stuff that came with waterloading, I didn't like it anyway. I didn't like getting up to pee in the middle of the night.
yeah,
I didn't like having to drink loads of fluid anyway because my fluid intake would generally be probably too low for what it should be at the minute.
yeah,
But then, even on top of that, then I liked. I feel like when I was waterloading as well, I always had all that water in my body, so I didn't like look at the scales in the morning. So
yeah.
I always be like trying to get there, be in a better position when it comes to like the actual like getting in the bath or the sauna. Then, the night before, like
Yeah, that's another thing as well, why I don't use it all the time too, because sometimes some people respond very well and just boom, 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 gradually drop throughout the week. Some people will hold the water and they're like, fuck, my weight's not moving. And then they start
you
freaking
start panicking.
or get
Aye,
stressed, you say there. Like that's another reason because there was another guy there who was like, oh, am I going to waterload now? It's like, look, you're already hyper stressed. You're already a hyper stressed person about your weight. I don't want to put you on a water load because then every day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, my weight's not fucking moving
uh-huh.
until the drop. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Potentially, maybe he'll respond well and he'll drop every day, but I didn't want to because it was the first time doing it. I was like, I don't want to put you on a water load because what happens if your weight doesn't drop? You're already freaking out about weight. Not that his weight was bad.
aye,
He's already just a strict. Just a personality type. So I was
aye,
like, I'm not going to put you on a water load because if that weight doesn't move, then you're going to freak out even more, and then that's going to
aye.
cause you the stress, cortisol through the roof. Then there's even more water retention, and then there's more problems. So,
Then even you have people that's doing the water load. Like I had Keith on, and Keith was dropping about a kilo a day while upping his water intake, and I was just like, "How is
there's
this
other
even
parts of the
possible?"
brain, there's other people, and to me, it's down to their renal physiology. So your kidneys is what will impact your sodium excretion and reabsorption, and your fluid excretion and reabsorption. So that's where when you do the water load, that's where all the magic happens is in your kidneys. So for a lot of people, it depends on maybe how their kidneys respond. Compared
Mm-hmm.
to another person. So it can be individual, it can be genetic. So yeah, like it's one of those things you say, oh, you should trial it, but then who the fuck is going to trial a water load? It's very hard
Aye,
to get. I've had about three people that have trialed cuts in the whole time that I'm doing this. They've been like, I
mm-hmm.
want to trial a cut here, and they've done it. And then we're like, well, this works, that works. Like, it's very hard to get people to be on board with that. You know what I mean? So this is
I
why,
have a guy doing it. I have a guy doing it now this week. I have to actually do it as planned for him. Gaz
yeah,
PT down from all the CMAC boys. So
yeah,
he's a PT. Came in and wanted to trial like basically what they go through on fight week and stuff. So I'm kind of like in two minds, like what level. I was like, how much do you want to cut here? Do you want like a wee baby cut, or do you want to?
I will go on the higher end of fucking ideal, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's another thing that you should be trialing these things, but it's hard to get people to trial them. So generally, I'll ask people, have you done it before? How have you responded? How have you felt? Were you all right? How did you do it? What's your habitual fluid intake look like? Right, let's do it for thing. And I do stick to the kind of the 3 to 4 days high, maybe five at most. And then sometimes a taper like down in half, especially if they're like a wee bit worried about weight, and you do want to see because if you go from, you know, 6 liters to 3 liters in a day, you're going to see a good change in the scale generally. So that's why I do that. We drop sometimes with people.
See if you have a fighter though that say he's on the water load and has weights dropping, say daily. Say for example, like Keith drops a kilo, would you then like reassess and lower the water intake, or would you just keep it at what it's at because it's working?
If it's working, it's working. Yeah,
I just leave it, let it be.
let it go. Like,
So it's 100 mil per kg. Just say for example at the start of the 4 days.
again, depending on what his habitual intake is, like, you know what I mean? If he's
Yeah,
what 70 something coming into that, what 70 and 75, say that's what 7.5
7 and
liters.
a half.
You know what I mean? So if he's drinking 3 liters a day, that's fine. It's not, you'll know, like, going, it's not a massive difference. If he was drinking a liter and a half, 2 liters a day, and you put him 7 or 8 liters a day, it might be a bit too much. You know what I mean? So
Right.
generally,
Then you
go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to chat about something else.
Yeah, no, generally what I do is if it's not a crazy amount, if it's not taking them up to 8, 9, 10 liters, I generally double it. Um, or I would look at the 100 mil a day. in a round, just
Mm.
depending on what their habitual is. I generally try and at least double or put an extra 2 liters on top of their habitual, at least.
Aye.
And usually see a decent response. Like, but
Now I was going to say, like, another common thing that might come up too when people's actually doing the water load, that they're making mistakes in their diet, which maybe like the water load's not working. And
yeah,
then like one of them things could be like, I've seen people before that's came on to me that have water loaded before, but they weren't including, for example, like the other fluid. It was water loading to them, so they were having all this water on top of their actual fluid intake. They were
yeah.
including cups of tea, coffee, like soft drinks, stuff like that.
Not a lot of counts, as part of your total fluid intake. When people call it a water load, they think, again, because it's in the name, like it has to be the
They think it has to be water.
fluid, because your body treats the fluid the same. Most of the fucking drinks that you drink are 90% water anyway, you know what I mean? Near enough. Like, so
Uh,
your body's going to treat it as all fluid equally, almost like to an extent when it starts to excrete it.
I'm gonna
So
have 8 milkshakes here.
10 months, 10
I don't
months,
know what's happening.
10 monsters a day. Can't do exactly wait to 15 coffees and a fucking 3 pints.
No, I'm feeling attacked here now.
That's your water loading schedule, like 3 coffees,
uh,
2 espressos. Um, what's wrong with my dog, man? Damn.
he hears my voice this week.
That's what it is. Who's that tight?
Hi, sir.
All right, sir. Right here, scratching his back.
So you talked about hypernatremia and stuff there. No, obviously, like, is there any other dangers that like have came up or potentially have come up, like you working with people before?
It's gonna cut off here in a minute and a half. So, from Waterload.
Any war stories before we go away? Like any dangers to really happen from water loading with like clients or that you've maybe seen on the internet?
Well, no, well, I suppose it was that video where the person in the video that downed all the water after the weight cut, that downed actually distilled water as well. And look, to see what happened there, that was convulsions and tremors and vomiting and everything. That's all part of hyponatremia. I've seen it where people have drank too much, where one way went to sleep after the cut and then woke up and was like, fuck, I didn't get my drinks into me, and horsed the drinks into him. And then
Aye,
text me going, here, I don't feel right. And I was like, what happened? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's definitely hyponatremia. You need to go and get sorted. And lucky enough, his sister's fellow was a paramedic, and he rang him and he's like, no, he's right. He goes, you need to go to get sorted. But he didn't even go and get sorted. So he just basically, I told him
aye,
to slow down on the drinks, let your body kind of balance out, because it'll correct if it's not extreme or severe, but it can happen so easily and go extreme. I think we're going to run out.
Doctor McGee. Doctor McGee.
We're going to run out.
Wrap it up with that then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Right, I'll text you when we get off. I'm going to put this
Thanks
in
for
for
listening.
10 minutes of video.
Aye, we need to get them up on the YouTube as well.
Yeah, she'll put
The
it on YouTube.
electric ones.
I lost my YouTube channel, or Mark took over it. It's called Skinny Mark 2016.
Hey, we'll do that then.
I know, I create a new one. Fuck that. I'll actually go and make one now.
Make a new one, get them uploaded.
Yeah, I must upload this